From where we left off, we talked about ego being one of those things as to what causes leadership to fail. But at what point does, I mean, you have to have somewhat of an ego to get to that point, but at what point does it turn from positive to negative?
Well, I think what Jason said earlier, they go hand in hand. You're I don't know. You have to have a healthy sense of self, right, to be a leader. But I think when you start saying it becomes ego driven, you stop making it about everybody else and you start making it about yourself, and that's where the transition comes. And if the more you can stay mindful that you're there for everybody else, right? And I always thought this: I'm a made guy. I can't get promoted anymore, right? What am I like? What am I trying to do? Right? What I'm really trying to do is be successful, right, as a company and drive the bus, so to speak, to put people off at the right stop so we can ultimately be successful, right? And the minute I want to think something's about me, I have to step away, right? And we all know people that are toxic leaders, and I think we've talked about this before. The big Stanford study where it was just they interviewed, like, it was all the big, like the Corn Fairies and all that thing. And they were just the 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 preponderance of new CEOs these days. A lot of them are narcissists because someone like me comes in and sits down and says, "Yeah, I think we can fix this. This is how," and you're very measured and steady. That doesn't get the board excited. They want to hear, "God, oh, I've solved that problem. I'm gonna," and they make wild statements, right? It's one thing I think, Dan. It's one thing for you, like, you like to go in and plant your flag and basically to challenge yourself and put out, here's my goal. I'm going to put it out to everybody as a challenge. There's a big difference between that and saying, I've solved every problem somewhere else. I'm going to solve them all again. All right, you guys are dang lucky to have me.
You know what's interesting about this? So, we've all, likely taken the Briggs Myers.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, well, I was asked to, take it again here recently. And every other time that I have taken this, I've always been an ENTJ. For the first time, it came back as an ENFJ.
That's funny because I'm an INFJ.
And I'm wondering, you know, as I have been taking a lot of these, executive coaching courses, leadership courses on various different techniques, um, trying to be more and more empathetic, trying to meet my people where they need to be. I can only explanation I can have is why I would have shifted from that thinking to feeling aspect is that I've been spending a lot of time trying to meet people where they want to be, not where I want to be.
Right. It's the open office theory, right? If I walk into if I walk into someone's office or their workspace, what are my expectations when people walk into my workspace? I'm going to walk in and say, "Hey, do you got a few minutes?" Right? And it's not the assumption that everybody's just sitting around waiting for the boss to show up and asking questions. And even if they're going to sit down, you go, "Hey, do you mind if I sit down?" Right? And so if you start from that begets that. I'm going to offer, if you feel that you're being more in tune with the people that work with you, right? I'm gonna submit. Yeah, you might have taken a class and talked to some people and everything like that, but I think it's the amount of time that you've now been a C-level person, right? And you're not fighting to be there anymore. You know you belong, and you're probably a lot more comfortable in your own skin today with the mantle of that leadership piece than you were 3 or 4 years ago, right? And it's a
Yeah,
maturation thing.
yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that. Well said. I think part of it is training and exposure
Yeah,
to ideas and lots of failure and
yeah,
mistake making and learning, right? And introspection. But I think a big part of that is just, I don't know that it's always true, but I think it's often true that some people are predisposed to be leaders. And in order for that to be actualized requires time,
yeah.
maturation. And some of us take longer than others, right? Dude, when I was younger, I didn't want to lead. I was scared of it. I didn't want any part of it. And now I don't know that I want it, but I'll do it. And it kind of is more natural. And I think, Dan, that's kind of what you're describing. And the TK, that's what you're articulating, as I hear it, is that it's really just a realization of what you are as a person, and that's your nature. And now
Yep.
you understand how to wield it properly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's, leadership, I think it is a lot. It's about influence, right? True leadership. Being a manager is about the technocrat. It's about the nuts and the bolts, right? Being a true leader is about how you can influence others, right? Because sometimes you're asking people to do things that it's not their first choice to do, right? Because the garbage has to be taken out sometime. You don't get to do all the fun stuff every day of the week, and so but to create that, and I think and to be part of that, right, is when stuff needs to be done, it's like, don't just show up when the fun stuff is. If you're a leader, like, you walk around, see something needs to be done, take care of it yourself, right? Don't step over problems, as I say. There's a big box in the hallway, pick it up and put it where it belongs, so to speak. But and we've definitely brought. I don't know if I brought it up here, but I think I have. I think when you look at business, and then you look at leaders there, very few leaders started out their life going, I want to be a CEO. Right? You get out of school, you're trying to become whatever your chosen field is. You're trying to start to master the nuts and bolts of that, and take what I've learned and then add experience to that, right? And then maybe I want to be a team leader and like that. But there's not thing where I think sometimes when people think of hiring veterans, goes one of two ways, right? Either companies are like, oh, I don't want them around, or I want as many as I can get. I think with groups like the Honor Foundation, the Commit Foundation, and others, they're helping veterans to transition so that you're not in uniform one day and trying to do a civilian job the next. And because there's things that are wholly appropriate to say when you're in uniform to each other that are completely inappropriate when you're not, right? But if you think about it I always use the Naval Academy or West Point or any of the service academies. It's the easiest one to think. So from the time a young person is 18 years old, every day they're having it drilled into them that they are the future of the U.S. military leadership, right? And if you look at an entire career of a service member, I'm talking young officer, again, they get out, their first job is they're a platoon commander. I think they're getting a small group of 8 people, 16 people to lead. They're being put with very experienced senior enlisted people. The old joke is like, what's the worst thing that you can hear is when the ensign says, in my experience, right? And we joke around with the ensigns in the Navy because you're like, ensign is the best word on earth. If you're with the right inflection, if the ensign does something good, you're like, ensign. But then you can metaphorically roll the newspaper up when the ensign does something wrong, be like, ensign, right? But everybody is in on the fact that these young officers, especially when you're a senior enlisted guy, these young officers, we are to prepare them to take over the company, like be the C, to get them to flag rank. Every bit of their career is programmed towards that, right? I've got to do AOI, assistant officer in charge tour. Then I got to do an officer in charge tour. Then I'll probably go do ops. I'll be the second or third ops officer in charge of paper clips and fax machines, because now you're putting them in the room to hear how decisions are made. Then they'll go back to school and they'll get some more formal education. Then they'll come back and they'll be the XO. Then they'll go to the CO. Then they'll go back and get further education and what we call JPME, Joint Professional Military Education. And now they're going to be as an 05, 06, they're going to be introduced to other services, future leaders, right, to start creating that network. Right? And then when they give somebody a star, Admiral Olson, when he was a 1-star, I think he was being rather humble because he is. But I said, hey, when are you getting a 2nd star? He goes, I don't know if I am. Or he's a retired 4-star. And he goes, I don't know if I am. And I go, well, you're the only one that doesn't know it then. Right? Because he was that kind of leader. Like everybody, you're not just rooting for him. You expect the military to do the right thing and make that guy the leader. It's probably the greatest thing I've ever heard about leadership at the executive level. Right? If you look at the flag officers, admirals and generals, think of that as the C-suite of the military. Right? Well, when you roll into your first job in the C-suite, you're not the CEO. You're some other CEO. And again, you're trying to figure out, how do I sit at the table? What's my purpose? When is it appropriate for me to interject? When is it appropriate to ask for help or to help somebody else? And you're trying to find that. But now there's a spotlight on you that hadn't been on you before, right? And that puts some more on people. The Navy, as the admiral said, he goes, hey, 1-star, they're just taking you out for a ride to see if you can behave yourself. Right, that you understand that if if they upgrade you to first class, you're giving that seat to your aide, and then you're going to go take the coach seat, right? Because he doesn't want to be in front of Congress. It's like there's a perception, right? And I think a great leader also manages perception well, right? Because you're managing how people perceive you, and you have to be. I always say it's like you have to be empathetic, and you have to have accountability, and you have to manage your emotions at times when you really don't want to, right? But more importantly, you are managing that day-to-day process of garnering greater influence and then passing that on. I'm a big give it all away. Right? I can delegate all the authority that I have, and I want to do that as quickly as I can in any organization. The only thing I can't delegate is responsibility. It's always going to be on me, but it's every day I show up to give more and more to the people that work with us, because then they take it down. And what you find out over time is that junior people start making very good decisions way up outside of what they think. And so then, hey, every company's got financial issues, right? I'm not saying you're going broke, but you've got to be mindful of that. So I might not be able to give a guy or a girl a raise right then, but you know what? I can give them more responsibility, and give them the intrinsic skills, and then catch up with everything else, right? So I think there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. But I always, obviously having spent 20 years in the military, I kind of try to look at both and balance it, because frankly, the one thing, the military, you're conscripted, right? You've enlisted, you got an ID card that's got an expiration date. Well, if people don't like working with me, they can vote with their feet, right? And they can leave the next day. And I think when, some of the folks that we've worked for together, it's like that. What were you trying to do after about 6 months? Like, okay, this is not trending in the right direction. And I don't mean the business, but I mean the day-to-day, nothing's ever one person's fault. It's always everybody else. I can't believe you guys are screwing up my batting average. That kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
That's when you start. That's where F on your report card shows up after a while, right? Because anybody can luck into success one time, right? It's repeatedly showing up to an organization or a different organization and taking something that was semi-functional or non-functioning correctly, and getting it to the point where you can realize success because everybody understands what they need to do, and they feel that they're a complete and whole participant, and that there's an appreciation for their opinion and for their work effort, right? And I think that's where leaders fail. There was a great line in Mad Men one time, and one of the people comes in and she's like, you don't ever tell me thank you. He's like, I pay you every Friday. That's thank you, right? That's why it's set in the 1960s. Like, that doesn't work today, right?
No.
And it's, those types of things crack me up, because we've all three of them heard it, right? We've all had a boss that the first thing he did when he got there was bribe every executive by raising their pay, right? To a point where you were somewhat overpaid in some cases, right? And it was basically, hey, I'm going to buy my way into this rather than I'm going to earn my way into it.
I can only think of a couple of those executives that were overpaid.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
See, and I to your point, what I've been thinking about listening to you talk is, in my experience in industry, it seems like leaders fail, and sometimes it's actually not their fault, because as a group in this company or this organization, we have a tendency to promote people into leadership positions that aren't necessarily prepared for it, specifically around ego, because that's a hard jump to go from it's all about me, look how good I am, to now I got to lead all these people. Where do I get that validation from? And we don't do a good job as a group, a social group, in guiding people through that mental psychological transition to, no, now you're here to serve the group. The group's not here to serve you, which is the exact opposite of what you just experienced yesterday. And it's like magic pissy dust. Ooh, you got a promotion. Now you know what to do. No, dude, it's not intuitive all the time.
Well, I think that's one of the big down like adverse things out in the civilian world is nobody's thinking about, hey, we want to promote you, and how are we preparing you along the way, right? And a lot of it is
there's no pipeline.
Like, hey, I've taken, what he says, what Dan just says, like, I took this course, I did this, I was talking to these people, right? You have to go out and be very proactive about finding the knowledge, right? Or finding a base to work from and saying, okay, I can do this. And I think the big transition isn't like as an individual contributor, you've got to, you got to make the donuts, right? Whatever business you're in, you got to make the donuts. And if the donuts get made, everybody is accolades. Once you're the leader, it's not a daily thing. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you get, hey, we've had this problem, we jumped the shark on it, and thing. You've got to make yourself available. And a lot of people, when they leave that individual contributor role, they're so used to being able to pull, thing. I think introverts typically do a better job of that transition, right? Because they like, I can manage that team coming to me all the time, and I like every time they do something right, any situation I put them out at trade shows, speaking, whatever, and they're like, everybody's like, why aren't you answering the questions? I'm like, they're the ones that build all this. I'm just trying to keep the wheels in the cart, right? and things like that. Once you develop that attitude, and that their success is your success, right? And the last thing I want to hear from a leader is, look at me, how good we are. Now, you're going to go to board meetings, and you have to explain what's going on, and you have to be. There's a way to be competent and express success and express proper direction without turning it into I, me, I, right? And that's just, it turns everybody off. Mm-hmm. The word I use all the time is we. Right? I buried that into my vocabulary so hard that, or I start with, hey, this person is doing this person's doing that. Well, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm working there too, but they're the lead on this. And I let the people from the parent company call directly to engineers, sales guys, whatever. And they're like, that doesn't bother you? I'm like, no. And they're like, yeah, well, surprisingly, every time we talk to them, everybody has the same story. I'm like, yeah, because we don't BS each other and we know where we're at. So it's pretty, and we all invite constructive criticism.
Right? Well, I think that's one of the big key issues in what fails in a company is that they fail at communication. Not everyone understands the vision and the mission that we're on, and I see it all too often where teams within an organization, they don't even actually have a charter. And as part of the charter, you should see this is what we do and this is what we don't do.
Right.
So it's very clearly articulated in there, because right now, like I when I've gone in and I've done consulting for different organizations and I start getting them to go through this exercise, what I wind up seeing is there's multiple groups that think they own a particular process.
Right.
Yeah. No, it can only be one. Yeah. This case, it's the Highlander. There can be only one that can own this.
That's funny.
Yeah, and maybe you have like a backup, right? But there's a designated authority in some way.
Correct. Yeah, I think once people understand how they fit and they feel comfortable, that's when everything, because now, like I'll walk out on the floor and they're doing stuff, and like we have a board and one that says nerdiest things said in any given situation. Every month you get tick marks. All of a sudden my name's up there now, and I'm getting there because I'm out on the floor and we joke around, and like it's like somebody the other day said something about we were say we need to get rid of prime numbers, and I got a lot of engineers and we were all laughing about it. And I go, other than that pesky little encryption thing, we don't need prime numbers, and but it's it's fun now when once you get past that, hey, I'm showing up and we've got to, you're kind of wrestling people into the vision a little bit. But once everybody has it, I'd rather have to slow people down than have to get behind them every day and push them. I want them to have to come and say, hey, let's speed this up. Let's do that.
I think that's an interesting principle, right? Because as a leader, if I'm the bottleneck, that's a good thing, because then I have the opportunity to delegate that responsibility to somebody and give them a chance to step up, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I'm not like, the older I get and the more experience I get, is the less and less I want to have a big pile of stuff on my desk, right?
Yeah.
Are there things that I absolutely, by virtue of where I sit, have to do? Yeah, and I don't think, but there's anything else. I've got fantastic folks at every position on the board, and we've, as a group, bought into the culture we have, and a lot of it was existed before I got a great group of people. And like I always say, I just had to get my foot off the company neck a little bit, and let everybody stand up and start making adult decisions, and see that action. Right. I think I see this in manufacturing. I think one of the reasons, like a small, like I will get really experienced, really high talented people that show up from other big companies. When you're manufacturing, aviation is big in this. So I know a guy that worked at Lockheed for like 15 years, never got to see the F-22 fly. He was there from the drawing board. He was like, P-51 Mustang was from in somebody's head on the battlefield in less than 300 days. And now we got this thing, it's 18 years into it, and we hadn't flown it yet, or 15 years, whatever it was. So he gets frustrated, right? Whereas if you don't like something in our airplanes, get on SolidWorks, redesign it, and go print a carbon part, like do whatever you got to do, and let's make that work, right? And so that level of iteration gives people self-satisfaction. We joke around that, like, I want to get some young folks coming out, like coming from University of Michigan aerospace program like that, but I almost want to send them to a big company for a couple of years so they have an appreciation when they get down. Because if you do it the other way and then they go to a big company, and like one of the guys that worked at Chrysler, and like he knew that anything he did it was 3 years before it got in a car. And I'm like, that's crazy.
At least 3 years. At least 3 years.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
I mean, and when we were talking about not too long, maybe actually now several years ago, back when we were still doing This Life in Tech, I was, going, look, like Tesla's just a proof of concept for these big car manufacturers.
Yeah.
Now look at them. They're eating, people want a Tesla because it's a cool thing, but Porsche's Tesla or the Porsche's EV that competes with it, I would take that thing over a Tesla like I wouldn't even, it's not even a thought.
No, one of the CEO of the parent company, he has one. It was a beautiful automobile.
Oh my gosh. Like
have you seen the DeLorean?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, dude. Ooh.
Yeah.
Is it an EV DeLorean?
DeLorean now is going to start manufacturing again, and it's a full EV, and it has the classic.
They use the same car.
Yeah. Oh man, and it's supposed to have a superior range, which is what I've kind of been waiting on. But to your point, right?
Yeah, and especially like when all of a sudden the Hyundai can start beating your and battery, so there might be some old tech in that Tesla. It was state of the art, 15 years ago at this point, but now everyone's leapfrogged. And I think that's a big thing with many leaders. Like I'm wondering, is Elon making the same mistake as Kodak, as BlackBerry, or is he actually utilizing his first principle design thinking for what's going to be next, or is he just iterating because he's got the truck? Like everything is basically the same thing.
Well, I heard him speak the other day, and it was I don't know, like all of Tesla's patents have been open sourced. He goes, he wants everybody to use what's available. And he goes, if someday somebody develops something that puts us out of business, that's okay, because it was good for the world, right? But just from basic knowledge of the battery industry lately, everybody's going to be going to solid state batteries shortly. And then they'll be graphene enhanced. And so the power density and the ability to really quickly charge is going to drastically change. And at the power plants, if you're going to say we're going to use natural gas, for example, if you use a petroleum product in your car, it's about 2 to 3% efficient as far as being clean. They can do at the pump to put it in your car. Right now, I think it's in the 40 to 60% range of efficiency because of the big mechanical, capital expense, things that make it more efficient, right? You're going to do that more efficient, and you make the power density of the battery more efficient. And I think the number that people say they have to get to is about 600 miles, right? Because that's mostly what most people don't want to drive any more than that a day, right? If you can, and then with a quick charge, that one cycle of darkness or whenever you stop for the evening, you've got to show up with a fully charged automobile the next morning, right? And I think think about how many power stations, charging stations that Elon Musk has. One of the folks has a Tesla up here, and they get in, and the first thing it does, it shows you where every power station is on the big screen, or every charging station. Even in the apartment building here, they've got five or six EV charging stations, and the high velocity ones too. So it's inevitable, and I do think that I haven't sat or driven the new Ford Lightning, when you really start getting industrial equipment to pickup trucks and the bigger trucks. I mean, even now I think, and I haven't really thought about it, but even like all these city buses that are all running on natural gas now.
Somebody
Right.
needs to tell Stoney to go get that Ford Lightning pickup truck, so he'll stop complaining about how much diesel costs.
Speaking of, I haven't talked to him in more than a minute, but I was reading an article the other day, and it was like the 20th unhappy cities in America, and a lot of it was based on how much violent crime is and unemployment is. This typical thing in Virginia, it's Danville, where he's from, and it's an unhappiest city in Virginia. And funny enough, Virginia Beach is the happiest city in Virginia.
To your point about the charging stations, I was surprised recently within the last 6 months. Our big gas station chain here is Sheetz,
Yep.
and they've all started putting Tesla superchargers in.
Yeah. I saw that there's a Sheetz. It's in Pennsylvania right off the interstate. And I pulled it, and like having gone back and forth there a few times over the years. Now they've got a whole bank of them.
Yep.
The Wawa in the Mid Atlantic, like where I was, this goes back more than a little bit, but was at a basketball tournament in Richmond and pulled into the Wawa, and they had a whole setup where everybody's there. They got the picnic tables. Everybody's out there with their sandwiches. It's a great day. They sit there for 30 to 45 minutes, and then boom, they're on their way.
Mm-hmm.
So how soon, or how long into the future do you think it's going to be until Tesla gets sued, just like Apple is with their Lightning port connections of having different connectors for their EV vehicle versus everyone else?
No, they're all the same.
I was under the impression that Tesla's was proprietary.
No, I'm pretty sure it's not, because like when I walk back into the thing where we're in the apartment building where we have those chargers, there'll be a Tesla. There's somebody has one of the Porsches. There's a Hyundai there. I think they're not in like predetermined spots. They just all park wherever's available and they plug in.
Yeah, I actually don't know what the different connectors are, if they're different at all between the manufacturers. I have no idea.
I think that was like, the industry is like, hey, like if we want max penetration, we've got to kind of agree on it. And I think it's easier with the automobile industry, because just like the automobile industry, if you look now, like they have the capless gas tank, capless, where you come out and it creates that vacuum seal, and you don't have to worry about that. That started, I think, in 20, and I think that's one of the better things that's out there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting question, man. I don't know. Look, to your point, if I was making or designing an EV, and Tesla already innovated and invested in the biggest problem, which is the infrastructure to charge, why wouldn't I adopt their interface? Because now I can just write
all their patents are open source, so it's not like you've got to pay a royalty or anything like that. Just, hey, you're designing it. And I think it's incumbent on everybody, like first to market type thing is, even when we start having light bulbs, right? What's the thread, the thread tilt and all that, number of threads per inch. And everybody's like, well, we'll just go with that because people are starting to manufacture, lights and stuff, around it. So I think that's good design engineering, though, if you can adopt what somebody else is, because it doesn't matter. Right? That's the thing. It's there's no magic in that, other than the fact I have to plug it in to charge it so we can drive it. But there's no, what do I get by doing something different? I cause potentially pain and suffering in my customer base where I can alienate people.
So the nice quick Google search, Tesla does have a proprietary plug for theirs, but they were supposed to be opening it up to where they would sell an adapter for others to be able to connect into theirs. And they also provided an adapter to their people so they could use non-Tesla EV charging station. So I wonder if that's because he saw the writing on the wall of what's going on with Apple and the EU, that they're going to be forced to go to a traditional USB-C rather than their Lightning port.
I think that I think the big redesign cue for Tesla is going to be, how do they repower that car? Like how quickly they get solid state batteries and like that. And I mean, because like you said, people like there's a certain cachet with having a Tesla, but I have a 2020 Volvo. it is hard when you go on the website now in the 22 Volvos to find the non-electric models. Right? And they're really pushing the bus forward, and they've gone to, like, their whole operating system now is the Google operating system, largely the one that Tesla uses, but they've gotten rid of their proprietary stuff. And I thought they did this very innovative thing where they used Polestar motors on the top end of their gas cars, their ICE cars, and then now they've made, like, Polestar is its own separate, flagship under the Volvo company. And they got all this test data, and they worked everything out by just saying, hey, we'll take the top end Volvos and we'll power it up with the Polestar stuff. And but I think that's very innovative. But Dan, I totally agree. Like that, the Porsche Taycan there's no compromise in design on that thing. I mean, that thing, you get it with this big battery that effectively, like, will bury you with torque when you take off from a standstill.
I think it's like one of the partners we have went out with them, and he's got one of those things, and I'm just like, my gosh, like, especially when you're talking about they're basically the same amount of money.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would go with anything other than the Porsche.
Yeah.
Right. So the Plaid is a little bit faster, but I mean, that's only from the recent software update. All that's going to take is, again, a different software update from Porsche.
Right.
It's a, and I mean, again, then it's also, and it's Porsche.
Didn't Mercedes just come out with an E-Class that's fully electric now?
Yeah.
See, that's when you talk about leadership in understanding and adhering to the spirit of the brand. That's Porsche, and they have a very strong sense of what makes a Porsche car. Like, they always have that very specific front profile aesthetic, the headlights, right?
Yep.
And the little flute coming up, and the back ends always have that fat, meaty ass. That's Porsche. And then they just iterate on different components within that ecosystem and within that brand. And man, and they've been doing that for a long time, man.
It's knowing your corporate why. Right? I mean, and they get it,
Well, and I think that's why a lot of people also fail. They don't understand the goals, because maybe from communication, or companies start chasing the wrong goals. Like, when I start seeing companies and they start, like, they'll want to, like, McAfee is a great example. Instead of them focusing on software security, they decided to get into hardware security. And we used to joke in the industry that this is, McAfee is where hardware security appliances went to die.
Right.
Like, McAfee would buy it, and then it would be end of life in like 3 years.
Yeah.
Like,
it would no longer be done. Yeah. Right. It's just like, there you go, gone. But it's because they didn't really get. I mean, they didn't know. They just said, all right, I'm going to keep buying everything instead of just like focusing. It's okay to buy other companies when it's enhancing your current core competency, but if it starts to go outside of that, you're going against what got you there, and it doesn't tend to go well. I've yet to see it go well. Let's put it that way.
Microsoft did it right. They didn't have an ERP system before Microsoft Dynamics. They didn't have that, and they went out and bought one, and then kept that team on and gave them all the resources they need to turn it into what it is today.
Yeah.
Well, I think, like, the McAfee story for me is a case study in what happens when you invent a problem to solve and don't recognize that you're actually inventing a fucking problem that you can't solve.
Yeah. I think when you look at, I think this is bigger. The smaller the company is, the more this, I think, is a bigger deal. But I think companies get away from a roadmap the bigger they get, right? Because now you have resources and you've got a little bit more flexibility. And if you have an aggressive shareholder base and aggressive board, they want you to go out and acquire stuff, and they want growth through acquisition a lot of times. And you're getting adjacent products, which is okay. But this, I think we have that problem. We were talking about, like, you get a roadmap, and then the silly thing happens. The sales guys come in and they go, hey, if you do these two things, we'll get a contract for $15 million, right? And I'll be like, oh, go get me the contract, and then we'll talk about it, right? And because the roadmap saves the company from its worst self, right?
Yep.
Because you got money, people, and time. And with the roadmap, you're trying to fully optimize your people and the time and the resources you have. What I would advocate is if I'm the chief product officer and they say, hey, we're going to do it, okay, tell me what we're not going to do on the roadmap, right? Because we don't have, it's not like we magically, there's no more magic beans. We gotta stick with this, right? I say this to people all the time. It's why people line up at the Apple store in October, because they know that they're going to execute. The iPhone's going to come out on the day it says it's going to be there and it's going to work.
Yep.
Right? And you can sell the roadmap and sell as the future. It provides internal discipline and external validation that you can execute on what you say you're going to execute on. All right. And you're never, ever going to lose money on evaluation by having your text, finance side, people don't mess with that because you end up in an orange jumpsuit. Like when you come in for due diligence, right? A CFO didn't want to go to jail. But when you look at, software stack, like I tell you, like how many times you go to a company, how many times you rebase, right? Your get rate. And they're like, why is that important? I said, I want to see your mistakes. I want to see how you recover, because that's part of the young economy. It's exciting. It's how do I fail forward? Right? What elegant method do you use? Because if I can see from a software perspective, for example, the elegance with which you solve problems, then when you go back to do, it's like, hey, whatever happens, we got to keep this team here. They got some really smart people. This is a really hard problem they're solving. But if you're constantly in this rebase mode all the time, it's like you're trying to hide your tracks to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Right? And I was helping a friend out who's one of his companies is going out and raising money. That was the big thing. It was like, stop rebasing. Let everybody see what you got. And I said, get accounts pretty cheap. They don't, it's not like, it's not like they're worried about the extra zeros and ones in there, right?
Right.
I think it's things like that, and it's creating this environment where nobody's going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. I walked in this morning. I got a computer for one of the guys on Amazon, and it came to the house, and I forgot to bring it in yesterday. And so first word I walked in, I was like, hey, I am a dummy, right? And then I proceeded to just say, hey, I'll have the computer for you tomorrow, right? But I think in anything in life, when you can foster an attitude in the company that it's okay to fail, it's not only okay, it's preferable, because I want you to go out to the end of what you think your useful limit is, and then step over that line a little bit, and do it in an environment where it's safe, where you can recover and do everything. We used to like driving schools when I was in active. We used to do that all the time. There was one guy, he would come in like second or third anytime we were racing around the track. He's like, I've never gone off the track. I'm like, all right, so you don't know where your limit is.
Right.
But I'm not telling you to be foolish and slam it into turn 4. But, in a lot of these places we go, it's not it's not an IndyCar track, and you can go into high weeds or whatever, right? But in life, you got to go, hey, I need to fall down, right? And as a leader, if you're not creating that environment where people have the opportunity to go, this may work, it may not work, and might lose half a day as it work, but if we do it and it works, right? But what's the alternative? Something fails, but I always say, I'm only one decision away from the right one. And people would always laugh at that. And I go, look, while everybody else is sitting around trying to be perfect, I go, I don't know exactly where to go, but I know we need to go that way, in a big, broad sense of, I just got to be generally faced in that way. If I start taking small steps that way, eventually the curvature of the earth is going to change what I have, and now I can do this and narrow in on the one path I need to take. And getting people, like we just did destructive testing on, we redesigned one of the wings. The wings worked fine. The center wing didn't work at all the way we thought, right? I mean, it was bad, right? We were like, that doesn't look good at all, right? But if we want to innovate and we want to make the drone lighter, we want to make it stronger, and we want to use less bonding material and everything like that, we've got to go, we got to break things, right? And we've got to do that testing. The wings, my opinion, the wings are still over-engineered, right? Because we wanted 5G at 6, it failed at like 6.5, but it sat there for a while and did it. And at 5Gs, I want a little bit of stippling on the wing. I don't want it to fail, but I want it to go, okay, we're near the end. But I think in life, I think the best success people have is when they get down, they have to get back up. And it's also and from personal experience, it's also when people get the angriest, right? Because, especially if it wasn't of your own doing, right? But that's where people, like, they lose their ever-loving minds. And I'd be throwing stones if I told you, don't do that. But it's, it's the longer that persists is doesn't then just become a business problem, becomes that person can become toxic and everything like that. It's just we work in this. There's two things I'm really concerned about. Are you a good human being, and are you good at your job? Right? It's easy. If somebody's good at both of those, they can stay as long as they want. If they're terrible at both, they have to go. The middle one is, hey, I've got a really smart, high-functioning employee who's an a-hole at the office. He's untrustworthy, whatever, right? That's the hardest one to get rid of. Because people are like, oh, well, we're going to lose this one. No, he or she is smart, and they're going to make everybody else toxic, right? And so when you talk about great leaders, you're not always talking about the highest individual contributor performer, right? And I think there's a lot of times like, oh, that guy built all these widgets, let's promote him. And I think when you look at founders, CEOs, a lot of times it's the smart guy that invented the widget, but he's got no people or business skills, right? And then it becomes destructive when you've got when you bring in, the term I like, which cracks me up, a professional CEO. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. You want to have twin 6-shooters walking in, hear a Spurs jingle as they come down the thing. It's like, go sit down, But is once you get to that point, you have to have a reality about yourself and go, I'm not fit to do this. This is not my core thing. I might be the best chief technology officer, they even make up some titles for thinker guys or girls that are going to do this, right? But you look at some of the best young innovative companies, it's somebody that has an understanding. You have to understand the business that you're in, but they're not necessarily, they weren't the smartest person in the room technically, but they most likely can explain it to everybody else a lot easier than the smartest guy, right? And that's, I think, when we start, and there's new software that people are working on right now for behavioral analytics. It's fascinating. It has a very high success rate of getting the right founder CEO in there and not wasting time with the old model of, these VC guys, oh, I got an eye for this. No, you got an eye for other Ivy League people that are white and look like you. That's what you have an eye for, right? That's all you have an eye for. You don't have an eye for anything else, right? And if we say moving into deeper into the 21st century as a leader, to me, diversity has always been important, and it's diversity of thought. Because if you have diversity of thought, all the rest of that stuff's going to take care of itself. Like you're gonna get the right people, and when the government starts counting people, then you're going to look the way they want you to look. Which it's a silly thing to me, but I think when you look at VCs and PE firms, it's just one Ivy League education thing after another. And the guy is his name is Chamath. He's an Indian guy that was one of the early investors in Facebook. He's a billionaire. And listening to him talk out in public, he was at Stanford. He goes, I wouldn't hire one of you. He goes, all you've done your whole life is learn how to follow the rules and live inside this little box. He goes, that doesn't make people great. Right? And the average billionaire in this country's GPA, if they graduated school, is 2.9, because they're thinking about it's a vision thing, right? And they're thinking about things in a way that other people aren't thinking. I think that's, if you want great leaders, you've got to have the people that are hiring these leaders, especially the bigger companies. They've got to challenge themselves to go, okay, what we've been doing obviously wasn't working because we need somebody new. What paradigm do I have to shift?
Right.
In myself and amongst the peer group to say, we're going to hire somebody that's ultimately going to really help us be successful, even if we don't know explicitly why on the day we hire them.
All true.
Well,
gentlemen, it's been fun. We'll have to do this again.
It's a long time since the three of us, we were going 3 wide down the track.
I know. We'll have to do this one again. As always, I appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon. Take care, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.